How you doing, huh? Good to see you. Chapter 8, talking about lessons 4 and 5. We're going to take these two lessons and we're going to just mush them together into one big lesson because we're still talking about this cultural change, right? This issue of tradition. How has the cultural identity of the United States changed over time? And what we're going to be talking about is something that we started talking about last, lesson and video that we did when we were talking about that numerality. We're going to keep talking about that right now because we're going to be talking about it from this perspective of finding new ways to express yourself, finding new ways to challenge what those old people think, finding new ways to present yourself so that you can, make sure you understand what you're looking at. And what we're going to be talking about here in this challenging of the new morality is what you see here with the art and literature. Because oftentimes when you see a culture begin to, challenge something, what you're going to see is that the culture embrace that challenge in its art and its literature. A way of saying, hey, the smart minds, the creative minds of this generation, that they're working on this problem. They're thinking about this, the things that are going on and this turmoil and this new morality, right? Because we don't forget that this whole new morality thing focuses on this issue of personal freedom, right? So what you have here is that a bunch of artists and writers are saying, you know what, we gotta take a look at this personal freedom and we gotta figure out a way for us to express that. And we got some painters up here we're gonna take a look at, right? You got painters like George O'Keeffe, who uses landscapes and still flowers to take a look at individual experiences. You got this guy John Marin who does it too with cityscapes. I mean, think about it, right? Take a look at this painting by O'Keeffe, right? It's a flower zoomed in all close like if you zoomed in on the flower way big and you were like, hey, take a look at this flower zoomed way in, right? I mean, I get it, right? A rose is a rose is a rose, right? You could have a rose, I could have a rose, every rose is just a rose. But you zoom in on that rose, like you hold that right up to your face. You're like, "Hey, Rose, how you doing? I'm zooming in on you," and every rose is different, individual, different experiences. We're all human beings, right? That's what George O'Keeffe is saying. We're all human beings. We all got minds and legs and arms and whatnot. But at the same time, you zoom in on us, we all have different experiences right in here in our heart, coming up with different experiences and whatnot. So what you're going to see here, as we take a look at the writers that are doing this, the writers are taking a look at things that are, just upsetting people, like T.S. Eliot saying, hey, we got this loss of spirituality in life, you know what I mean? Like, it's just not spiritual anymore. We're all too busy with our phones, and we're just too busy texting, and we're just not thinking about our spiritual sides. Ernest Hemingway says, look, man, we're a World War or World War I generation. It messed us up, man. Talks about how we're disillusioned. All that violence from World War I just broke us as a people. That's why we're so nativist in the 1920s. F. Scott Fitzgerald comes along and he says, what's the matter with you guys? Why are you like this? You're so superficial? Great book by him that kind of points this out. Great movie, too. The Great Gatsby. Everyone just wants to have the next biggest, bestest thing. That's not real. It's just not real. Just stuff. So we've got a lot of writers and artists that are kind of looking at this personal freedom, and they're embracing that personal freedom. And what they're saying is, I gotta challenge society. I can't let it get away with this. Right? I gotta push back. I gotta find a different way to make society think about itself. And I think one of the things that makes the 1920s really unique is that it's not just artists looking at the individual experience. There's pushback against that. There's tension between artists that are saying, Dad, stop with the superficialness. Stop with the loss of spirituality. God, put that away. But that at the same time, for the first time ever, America's really getting exposed to immediate mass media. Things that are happening instantaneously that all of us, no matter where we live, are beginning to suck up. We have radios nationwide, movies nationwide, magazines, all these kinds of things are nationwide. And with this mass media comes a shared national experience. People that are on the other side of the country can, watch a movie with the same stars like Charlie Chaplin or Rudy Valentino or music by Irving Berlin. And the people on the East Coast can see the same thing. People in Hawaii can see the same thing. It's a first for America, where at the same time you can have the same experiences. This is beginning to create one national culture. Because look, I get it. Different parts of our country, they think differently, they act differently. The South is different from New England. The West Coast is different from the East Coast. Great Plains, different from the Deep South. I get it. But at the same time, we have a national culture. 1920s is one of the times when that really begins to just tighten up a lot because of that mass media. Part of that is actually sports, because that leisure time that Americans had in the Second Industrial Revolution more than ever, that we had talked about going to vaudeville, starting to play sports like football and skiing and tennis and baseball and things like that, now that's actually shifted from kind of a casual participation to actual national leagues, national football leagues, national baseball leagues, actual leagues across the country where fans, no matter where you live, can share in this experience. That's a really big deal. That's why all of a sudden in the 1920s, you're going to have the first ever crossover stars. And by crossover stars, I'm talking about people who are in one sport, but at the same time, they are famous outside of that sport. Like your grandma, who knows nothing about baseball, will know who Babe Ruth is. Like the grandpa at the time, who doesn't even like boxing, is going to know who Jack Dempsey is. It's the same thing. It's like nowadays you could mention someone's name, LeBron James. My dad, who doesn't watch basketball at all, he's going to know who LeBron James is. You mentioned Tiger Woods to my mom. She doesn't know what golf is. She doesn't know what golf, whatever, whacking a ball with a club. She knows Tiger Woods. Maybe doesn't know anything about him, but she knows who he is. So we've got this nationwide culture that's really kind of uniting us together. So even at the same time as we have people saying we need to be individuals, we all have different individual experiences, we have this national experience as well, pulling us tighter and tighter together. And one of the things that makes that national experience really kind of exciting is that for the first time ever, we're seeing an empowered black middle class. Whole areas of America are seeing the emergence for the first time of a urban, large population based African American experience. And part of it is due to what's called the Great Migration. And you see hundreds of thousands of African Americans moving to the north in search of jobs in what's called the Great Migration. This is the first Great Migration, and you can kind of see what I'm talking about as you look at this map that's beneath my head. In yellow, you can see people that were migrating from the Deep South, sharecroppers, right? Spending most of their time on farms where they give the large portions of their crops to their landlords for rent. What we're beginning to see are some of these industrial jobs and families over several generations having saved up enough money that now they're able to escape sharecropping and move up the East Coast into places like New York and Philly and Boston and DC and Baltimore and take industrial jobs in those cities in this time frame of 1916 to 1930. And remember, this starts, right, during World War II or World War I when we see African Americans in those factory jobs. And you're going to see those people migrating from the Deep South of Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, etc., up into Central America, Chicago, Minneapolis, etc., and then Louisiana, Texas, heading out westward into California, up into Minnesota, and so on. This Great Migration is huge because in neighborhoods in all of these major cities, you're finally going to see vibrant African American urban communities with real middle class experiences. One classic example of this is in New York City. This neighborhood still exists. It's called Harlem, and I outlined it here for you. This is a part of Manhattan Island. It's just south of the Bronx, right here. This section right here, this is all the Bronx. And just south of the Bronx is Harlem, and it's primarily African American. It's just north of Central Park, and it's a place where African Americans, since they're coming together, they're able to bring culture which had been spread all over the South, widespread rural South, and you've condensed it, you've compacted it into this teeny tiny little area on an island. And that means that culture is going to have a chance to just kind of bloom and blossom. It's going to be amazing. The outpouring of art and literature, poetry and music that comes from the Harlem Renaissance and other cities across the country where neighborhoods like Harlem are. So, for example, You're going to see writers like Claude McKay and Langston Hughes begin to emerge, and they become the foundations of the modern civil rights movement, a real change to our cultural identity, because as black culture is starting to be exported to the white north in these black ethnic neighborhoods, what you're seeing are writers like Langston Hughes and Claude McKay challenge racism. They're looking at the experience of African Americans, and they're saying, you know what? We are not satisfied. We are not accepting of this position that we are in society. We need to do something about that. Langston Hughes is huge about that. Claude McKay really focuses almost on the kind of the emotional side of that experience as well. These writers inspire leaders like that we'll talk about, like Marcus Garvey and Booker T. Washington and many others that help really push the civil rights movement forward into the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. You know, I had mentioned on that last slide, as I was thinking about it, that there was kind of an exporting of black American culture, which had been taken from the South, brought into these small neighborhoods where it fused together all these different ideas, and then it begins to expand out across America. A great example of this is modern American music. Modern American music has its roots in the Harlem Renaissance, and even before that, if you want to go before the Harlem Renaissance, down into the spirituals and the gospel music of the Deep South and slavery. But what you're seeing here as an example of this would be music, in particular African American music of the time, is going to really change America. It's a process. It does take some time, but what you're going to see is musicians like Louis Armstrong take music from the South, often called Dixieland or ragtime, and infuse that with different kinds of improvisation and beats and sounds and create jazz. You're going to see band leaders like Duke Ellington create bands based upon this new sound, talking about how it has to move your soul, it has to give you swing, it has to give you passion, it's got to stir you. You got to feel the music in a way that Americans, especially white Americans, hadn't felt before. You take that and you mix it with singers like Bessie Smith, who was singing the blues, this soulful style coming out of African American slave spirituals, West African slave spirituals, and you have Americans for the first time looking at music that is going to inspire them for generations. Modern day country comes out of ragtime and the blues and Dixieland. It comes out of jazz. Rock and roll emerges from jazz. It emerges from Dixieland. All of these people, even Josephine Baker, becomes the first African American Broadway star, taken in by white audiences, not just in America, but even in places like France. This sharing of culture is the beginning. It's not a revolution, folks, don't get me wrong, but it's a beginning. It's the door is cracking open. And as time passes, we're going to see more and more that African American experience, that African American distinct culture being shared with white America, and white Americans embracing that. It's really going to change who we are as a people. One of the things that also comes out of this time is going to be the way that African Americans begin to fight back against racism. I know that I mentioned before how Langston Hughes and Claude McKay kind of become the first voices of the movement, but those voices are going to inspire others. I'll give you an example of what I mean. At the time, most African Americans voted Republican. They voted for whoever it was, in part because Lincoln was the party that had voted Republican. But as the 1920s move on, African Americans who are still going to cast their vote for Republicans are going to start to demand that Republicans make change, that Republicans actually do more for African Americans than just say, oh, 100 years ago we did give you your freedom. That was great. Yay, Republican Party. But it's now 1920, 1925, 1928. Time to get past that and actually start doing more for us. Start doing things like I don't know, passing laws against lynching. We know that lynching was still a terrible scourge plaguing the nation. Why doesn't the Republican Party take that on? Why doesn't the Republican Party do something with that? So you're going to really see African Americans push the Republican Party to continue to do more. NAACP especially does that. And other leaders too emerge. For example, Marcus Garvey, a Jamaican immigrant, comes to America and begins to say, you know what? If the Republican Party, the NAACP, they're not going to make change for us, maybe we should stop talking about living in the same place as whites. Maybe we ought to be separate. Maybe we should have a separate state, a separate country. Maybe we shouldn't be a part of this country. Maybe we should get our own place. Maybe we should do that. He calls his organization the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and his message is separation and independence from whites. Look, it's pretty simple. If African Americans can educate themselves on their own without the help of whites, they can get economic success on their own without the help of whites. If we can do that, African Americans can have their own power separate away from whites. They're not going to be able to stop us over time if we can do that. He's going to be the inspiration of one leader that's coming out later on, a man named Malcolm X, who says very much the same thing. Marcus Garvey's message is dangerous. This is inspiring to people. The FBI actually investigates him because they're worried about what he's saying. They arrest him for all things for mail fraud and use that to deport him back to Jamaica so he can't spread his message. But the seeds have been sown. And it's going to take a little while, but that is going to grow and it's going to become fertile. And we're going to see in the 40s, 50s, and 60s that civil rights movement blossom. So the Harlem Renaissance is going to be the beginning, the shoot that is just kind of emerging from the earth of the civil rights movement. It's an amazing thing. We'll talk more about it in class tomorrow.